Have you ever wondered what would happen if you immigrated to America and instantly met hippies? Well, in today's Silicon Valley to Spirituality show, I speak with Lulu Tsui. She immigrated from China to the Pacific Northwest and instantly came into a brand new life that was filled with cannabis, psychedelics, the Grateful Dead, and we talk about everything from entrepreneurship to generational healing to psychedelics. So without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. And if you have been enjoying the podcast, I would appreciate a like, a subscribe, or maybe even share it with a friend because that helps all the algorithms. Would love for more people to benefit from this podcast. So let's jump into this conversation. Let's go. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Silicon Valley to Spirituality show. This week, I have a wonderful guest, a beautiful guest, Lulu Tsui, the founder and chief experience officer of On the Revel. Lulu, welcome to the show.
Hey, Seibo, so good to reconnect again. I think you were on our podcast maybe back in the day, and it's so great to flip the script. And here I am. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes, it's definitely a different experience being on the other side of the podcasting table, but I really enjoyed this side because I love to hear everyone's story. And speaking of stories, why don't we give our audience just a brief origin story of who you are and what inspired you to create On the Revel?
Sure. I know we had a quick chat before we hopped on this. So I actually was born in China, and my parents were probably one of the first families, Asian families in Oregon. So we came to Eugene, Oregon, in 1980, and so it's interesting. So I was raised by plant medicine. So when my parents came with me, they had no idea what Americans were like because we're from northern China, so no exposure to the West. So dropped in the middle of Eugene, Oregon, which is a college town, a kind of a hippie utopia, very progressive city. And the folks that, came into our lives that, taught my parents English, took care of me, babysat me, introduced our family into Western culture, American culture. We're all cannabis growers, I'd say distributors, people coming back from the ashrams. Can't, just I went to my first dead show when I was 5. So just came and just was raised. I'd say I could probably summarize. I've been raised by plant medicine since I stepped foot in America at the age of 5. So then, of course, as a kid, you kind of take for granted things that you were raised with. And I wanted to see the big city. So, I left at college, fell into tech, um, worked for some of the largest, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies on the technology side as your experienced designer and researcher. Um, and then traveled, went from Oregon to Seattle to New York, to San Francisco to New York, to LA to New York. And then when I decided to move full time to New York in 2015, that's when legal cannabis opened up. So that brought me back to Washington State. That was my first market. My friends from college opened up two companies, one called Root Sciences, which was the extraction, processing, and post-processing side of the house equipment and build outs, and a Suspended Brands, which is their cultivation. So I spent about 3 years with them on site, still going back and forth between, my corporate clients and just learning and submersing myself in the industry in Washington State. And then I met my co-founder in New York, Jacoby Holland. We were both, designing and trying to fundraise for these technology platforms that we built for cannabis. We met, connected on tech, just realized, also connected on the fact that all of these conferences that we're going to just really didn't hit what we wanted to do. So we decided to start holding meetups in 2016 in New York. So 8 years ago, and now it's evolved into a trade show, a speaker series, and also a festival block party. So that's kind of the quick nuts and bolts of how I got back into weed again. And I'm also really excited to talk to you about the psychedelics piece, which I think um, is just a really beautiful evolution of, now that we're adults, being able to have that time to to reflect and understand a little bit more. So
Yeah.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And wow, there's so many interesting parts of your story, especially going to a Dead concert at the age of 5. Now, when your parents immigrated here, you said most of the people that were helping them get situated and adjusted to the US were growers, people that were already in alignment with the plant. Were your parents open-minded to that, or were they just around these people?
They just had no idea because Asian communities, Chinese, they're still recovering from the opioid epidemic from the 1800s. That Britain implemented as part of their normal kind of, you know, playbook
Mhm.
when they come in to take over. So even though, cannabis has been part of Chinese medicine for a very, very long time, our communities and our families are still dealing with that stigma and that fear of, how that can ruin lives because it was, opium. The whole country fell apart because of such a huge epidemic amongst the citizens. So, but my parents had no idea what Americans were like. So to them, this was American culture. And these were people that were interested in Chinese medicine. These people were coming with, my family for generations. We do Tai Chi at the local school every Saturday. And these are the people that would come and interact with us. So, I mean, I think it's a true testament that community can really change mindsets and open hearts to things that are outside of the normal, propaganda.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so they came to America, they just happened to connect with these groups of people. They didn't think anything of it because they were new to American culture, so they just thought, "Oh, wow,
Back
this is how Americans are."
working.
And so did they partake in some of the different, like, cannabis or any of these things that would alter the mind?
I mean, I don't know when I was younger, but there was one time I came back from college and my best friend, I had brought some weed back for my mom because she was having some vertigo and some migraine headaches. So I remember bringing back some like, mom, take this, try this. And then a couple months later, after for winter break, I was like, Mom, where's the weed? Like Andrea and I, my best friend, we want to go out. We want to smoke a little bit of weed. And she's like, oh my God, your dad's been smoking in the living room with all his friends. And I was like, okay. And I was like, Dad, can I have the bag back? And there was like one nug left. And he's like, oh, you know, giving me the parental, like, you shouldn't be doing this all the time because, da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, well, you smoked all of it. So they've been really funny. And then when I came back into the legal side of it, my mom, she's like, are you coming home? And I'm like, oh, we just started a new project. And she's like, okay, well, is that legal? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, is there going to be problems with law enforcement? I'm like, I don't think so. She's like, okay, good. Cause we'd have to set some money aside in case we needed lawyers. So it's so weird because they're such hardcore Chinese, like mainland Chinese strict parents. But with cannabis, it's a completely like curveball. So it's been really interesting to have this like one piece where they're really like cool about and everything else is so conservative.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is the power of the plant, just opening up the mind. And, for me, I've often wished that my parents were, I mean, they're open to it, but more as like, okay, well, as long as, you're providing for your family and no one's getting hurt. But I had always been like, man, I wish they were a bit more kind of curious. Like, well, what is this thing that my son is trying? And it seems to be helping him quite a bit. But I've also just accepted that they come from a drastically different background, not just from a generation point of view, but from a cultural point of view as well. And just accepted, like, hey, for them, their journey in this lifetime was not to be able to explore as quite as openly as I get to explore, but they were the conduit that did allow me to move to America and then really kind of open up. And what I really appreciate about that is I do see a lot of the generational trauma that my parents have from their parents. And I'm hoping that a lot of this generational trauma can be broken because I'm a bit more awakened than they were at this age and just have access to more healing modalities and things of that nature that could potentially, halt the generational trauma at my generation, and hopefully my kids will benefit from that.
I love that. And if anyone in the audience is listening who has access to Tiger Balm Corporation, if you maybe decide to put a little bit of CBD and then move it to THC, I think the elders would fall in line very quickly to be more accepting of cannabis into the culture.
You know what? I remember when I was younger, Joe Montana was actually sponsored by Tiger Balm, and so this idea actually, I haven't even thought of that brand for such a long time, but when you said it, I immediately felt this like, yeah, I'm gonna
It's
reach
a
out to them
staple.
after this and I'm gonna see
It's a
if I can get it
staple,
done.
right? It's a staple in every Chinese household. I can't speak for the other, Asian groups, but Tiger Balm and then that little white, that little round kind of oval bottle with the blue strip and the
Mhm.
flower,
Yes.
every Chinese family, right? So that's just part of the healing that we have. Like, cause Chinese people, I think culturally, we don't really hug or touch.
Mhm.
And when we do, it's to heal. So it's to massage, it's to, I just remember I think this is kind of sad, but the only time like my parents and I touched was when I was sick or when they were sick. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Well, let's segue into On the Revel. You talked about the early events that you went to. It just didn't seem to align with like what you wanted to see in a cannabis show. So, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of On the Revel and how it's different than the other typical cannabis events that people usually go to?
Yeah. So I think in plant medicine, what we've seen in cannabis and also psychedelics is the first set of events are geared towards like the two polar opposite demographics, right? There's like the suits and the lab coats that are talking about, the science of it and how to make money from it. And then there's like the activists, the kind of the more like kind of hippy dippy activists and very vocal folks that are trying to make sure that, legislation is passed correctly, influencing a lot of the community side. But if you've gone to any of these events, we lean towards one direction or the other, but it's not always one or the other. So, I mean, I'm kind of in the middle. I can understand both sides. I probably lean a little bit more woo woo these days. And we just weren't like Jacoby calls them male pale and stale conferences, right? It's like people are beige, the food is beige, the carpet is beige, the walls are beige. And, we're in New York where it's just so much more dynamic. And there's, I do feel bad. Like I grew up in Oregon, went to school in Washington. There's not a lot of diversity there. It's like it's predominantly very white. But you get to New York and everybody, any type of, background is here. And that's what I very much vibe with. And, we just didn't really see anything that was, one creating an environment where we felt comfortable because, cannabis is not just business, it's community, it's being able to share a joint, have a conversation, like, and it didn't really, the events that we were going to didn't really have any of the cultural parts that are also important, but also New York is, the epicenter of culture in a lot of ways. So, with food, fashion, music, art, like it's all here. So we just wanted to see like, hey, let's create something that we would want to go to. And let's bring the people that we fuck with, that we've met along the way in our respective markets, who we align with, who we vibe with, who we think are not gatekeeping information, but
Mm.
really wanting to be, abundance mindset of sharing information. So that's who we just started inviting out to New York because New York also is very different in terms of relationship building, right? So like I'm in tech, I've been on the West, lived in the West Coast for 15 years. I could have a whole relationship with you for 15 years on Zoom. Like we'd never have to, New Yorkers, because I think we're on top of each other all the time. There's a lot more need for interaction and like physical presence. So, we just started seeding people because what we wanted to do was like, hey, these are the people that we believe in. Once our market starts, work with these people. Like these are the ones that are going to be like very open to collaborating versus kind of like smash and grab type of vibes. So that's what we started. We didn't really, and then of course community. So the cultural piece of it, doing a block party in the summertime, which is quintessential New York. And then 2 years ago, oh God, was it last year? Oh my God, last year, with our market started, and that's when we held our first trade show. So our first trade show was at the bottom of our gymnasium. We were doing a conference first, at City Tech College. And then we kept on hearing, from the retailers. At that time, I think there was only 55 or 60 card licenses that had been issued. And we kept on hearing from them, like, well, how do we connect to get product in our stores? And at the same time, the part of some other associations I've been part of, the growers and the producers and the brands from upstate were like, how do we connect with the retailers? Like there wasn't an easy way to connect. So I was like, okay, you guys, I know you're going to hate me like 2 weeks before our event. Okay, we got a space downstairs. Let's cost it out. Let's see if we can just open that space and we'll just send like the feelers out. Come to the basement the day before or the gymnasium the day before, and let's see what's out there. So our very first event, we had about 60 exhibitor tables, so 60 brands, and we brought in about 44 of the 60 card licenses. So that
Wow.
was that was the birth of Buyers Club, our Revelry Buyers Club. And since then, we've held two more, but the second one was upstate. That was, I think we did that in June. And then this past year, we did one in May, upstate. And then now we're doing October 4th and 5th, our kind of giant festival that combines day one of our Buyers Club with day two of our conference series and our block party. So, you know, we're crazy and dumb because we're doing it all at once. But we're masochists. That's why we're in cannabis. And we'll see how that goes.
Oh man, that's so cool. And I really love the focus on the community aspect. For me, growing up in the Bay Area, most of my traveling, I guess, was international. And when I did travel domestically, I would go to, I think New York is the only other place that I traveled to. So like my idea of America was very like San Francisco and New York centric. So lots of diversity, just lots of art, a lot of different types of people just being tightly compacted into a small area. And then when I started just going to these random cannabis shows in these different states, I really saw like the homogeneity of like the rest of America. And one of the things that you said that really resonated with me was just talking about like kind of being in the middle of like the counterculture and then like the business guys and really wishing like there was a place that was maybe not so polarized on each side. And, it sounds like that's what you created. And I love the fact that like about like three-fourths of the people with licenses showed up. And I also love that like it's the buyers club, then it's the conference, then it's a block party. To me, that seems like a very holistic experience that one could have in just 3 days. Because I do believe that I was when the business side of things opened up, I really like dove deep into it because I felt like, wow, this is the way I could feed my family. I need to understand like how the market is starting to evolve. And it did take me away from the culture and like a lot of like why I even love the plant in the first place. And so what I wanted to ask you was, did you already have experience throwing events, or how did this idea of like to me throwing an event was like so kind of beyond, like it's something I've thought
Yeah,
about, but whenever I sat down to even just start, it just seems so overwhelming that
it
I would
is. It's
just kind of
crazy.
quit.
Yeah, I mean, I come from tech where, it was very kind of insulated, right? You have your team, you have your dev team, like it's tech, so there's like a lot of structure around it. There's flow. It's an industry that's been around for a very long time. So like, I mean, I started in tech in 1994, so I went through some of the growing pains with that, but never in a million years did I think we would do events, especially at this scale. It's a lot. There's just like a lot of moving parts, and New York is extra extra special. We're dealing with the first time with a building that's union labor, so that's also very interesting. I know it's just like with events, like you basically it's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? There's like the production side, the marketing side, the sales side, the food side, the vendor side, and they're all like little pieces of a puzzle. And you're like constantly trying to find the right piece. And then you've assembled your pieces, and we're 3 weeks out. This is the magic moment. The 2 to 3 weeks before the event, it's like all the pieces fit together. And there's like this collective, like, oh my gosh, thank God. And these are the moments that you live for when like the back of the office part falls into place. And then the event happens. And then like you bring all of these people. And we've been really, really stringent. We have a very big fuck yes list and a very not too big fuck no list. So I am very energy focused, right? So my whole thing is like, people bring your good vibes. And if someone or something is going to not bring good vibes to my team or to the event, we really don't need you here. Because as everyone knows, you just have that one little cancer cell and it spread so quickly. And then all of a sudden, like my team's pissed off, which is not cool for the vibe. Someone's pissed off or offended or, being dicks at the event. And then that whole conversation spreads out. So we're just like very much energy focused of like, we want to create a room where good people can come and explore, be open minded, feel like they have opportunities. And that's what all of our events are about.
Yeah. I love that you use the word energy and vibe. I find myself using these words quite a bit, and people that knew me from my previous life would say that, what happened to the practical, rational, logical, scientific
You're still
based
there.
Seibo,
You're
right?
still there.
Eh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I would respond, I was like, "Well, in the latest models of quantum physics, everything is energy, so this is actually the right verbiage to use." And I've heard you talk about like coming in from a healing perspective. And before we jumped on, we talked a little bit about psychedelics. So before we jump onto the psychedelic portion, you said the event was coming up in 2 to 3 weeks. So for anyone in the East Coast or New York area, can you tell them a little bit more about this event?
Yeah. So it's at Pier 36 in Manhattan. It's a really beautiful venue. So Friday, October 4th is our industry day. So that is when the goal of that is to get the retailers and the brands to connect, write the POs, get our stores open, get the right products in the stores that you want, and get the right products into your store. Shake the hands, kiss the babies, like really, get to know your cultivators, your processors, your brands. That's what day one is. It's not open to the public. So industry people and New York industry operators, that's the vibe. Day two, Saturday, is our public consumer facing day. So this is also when, the retail staff or the, operational staff show up. So our bud tenders, our marketers, our consumers as well. So we're also really trying to just expand the addressable consumer market. We don't have vendor days here in New York, which is unfortunate. So brands can't really pop up in stores and talk to the consumers on site. So we're like, okay, well, the booths are going to be set up already. Why don't we bring in the people through, the theme is carnival. So, it's going to, have food. Our friends at Eat It, which is this really awesome pop up app. They're curating all the food vendors. We have the music part. So Joey Badass, Coda the Friend, um, Dallas and Angela Yee, who is just an amazing New York's born celebrity in a lot of ways, an entrepreneur and community leader. So she is going to be our keynote. So we're just bringing all the things that we love: food, games, weed, music, education. We got some amazing speakers. So day two is our public day, and we welcome anybody who, who is interested in cannabis, who is interested in joining the industry, who are just wants to come meet other folks that just enjoy plant medicine, like come through.
And then the third day is the block party?
Oh no, so day we combine the speaker series and the block party into day two.
Oh.
So I don't know if I can handle a 3-day event. Sable, yeah, I'm not young enough. That's a young person game.
Well, I love the format. It reminded I don't know why this vision came into my mind, but I was like, "Oh, it's like the mullet of events. It's business in the front, party in the back end." And yeah,
Exactly.
I love how you could
Exactly.
get all the
Like that.
commerce out of the way. Because one of the things that I go to a bunch of trade shows, and MJ BizCon is probably the largest that we all kinda see everybody at, and,
Right.
in my experience, most of my connections that I've made that have become more fruitful as the years have come on, has never been kind of walking the trade show, but it was always kind of like who I met at the evening parties and just was able to meet them more on a person to person basis versus like a vendor retailer or someone looking for capital and trying to find the right investor. So I really love that format. And I was curious, what is your favorite memory of throwing these events?
Oh my gosh. Like my brain, I'm also in production mode right now. So I'm like, okay, research, go back into the database. I think what you talked about, like having a different vibe at the trade show versus the after parties. Like I think our trade show has the vibe of an after party. So, a lot of people say, um, oh my God, it's like a family reunion. I get to see my friends again, and it's not just and then for day one, we're really we don't bring in like the looky loos. A lot of the trade shows, anybody's welcome. Like we are very specific that this day one is a very specific purpose. So like I always say, like, oh, people are like, can I bring my wife or my mom? And I'm like, have them come for day two. Because if you're doing business, do you really want to bring your wife and your mom into your business conversations? Maybe, but like it's very concise. It's very New York. We're doing it in 7 hours. Like there's no like come in, meet your people, write those orders, get your leads, and then let's celebrate. So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, let's segue into you talked about some future events and we talked about psychedelics. So is the psychedelics, is that connected to On the Revel or is this a different project for you?
Yeah, no, it's connected to On the Revel. Again, never thought we'd do events. But we're getting pretty good at them. And I've been involved in the psychedelic space now for about 5 years. So I'm an advisor to Oakland Hyphae. Shout out to Reggie. And I've been using a lot of the UX methodologies that I've used for discovery and understanding and research in other industries to this market. So, or to this industry, I should say. So, just learning a lot from interviewing people, learning a lot from just asking questions. So, it's been really cool. I hosted my first psychedelic conference or psychedelic retreat for my birthday in Mexico a couple weeks ago. So our friend Pizza Pusha is opening up a hotel in Tulum in Mexico. So I got to do a little test drive of what that could look like. Brought my team flew in, some friends flew in. I can honestly say like our team is probably operating probably 3 to 4x more efficiently after this event, just in terms of collaboration, not getting pissed off with each other, just being completely aligned and in tune with one another. So that's been really cool. So we'll be probably working on, some of those types of experiences as well.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, this is kind of personal details with the team, but I'm curious. What was the healing modality in Tulum? It sounds like the team had a group healing session together that really cleared up and enhanced your ability to communicate with each other. So, I recently came back from a 3-day ayahuasca journey, and I actually went with a handful of friends, and so it was really wonderful to be able to be there together to share the experience, and then we drove from LA to San Francisco, so we had, like, 6 hours on the drive home to really open up and talk about,
Right.
all the learnings, and it did kinda dawn on me, like, what would it be like if I was actually with my coworkers, like, how different would it be to see your boss as vulnerable and honest as your boss could be, and to just kind of see each other at this core human level versus this hierarchical level that we typically have in companies. So I was curious, anything that you could share, I would love for the audience to be able to hear, how transformative this type of experience could be with within a company.
Yeah. So I think first thing to address is so on the Revel, we're pretty much a volunteer group. Honestly, I've never drawn a salary from doing these events. Everyone on my team, like we're very fortunate that we all have other projects that can provide like the money part of our lives that we need. So when we approach on the Revel, it's actually coming from a place of being of service. So my team is very, I think, very special. We're all a bunch of nerds. So like I'm on the design side, Jacoby's a mathematician, Peter is a neuroscientist, Saki has been an advocate and activist since she was born. And Jason is a human rights lawyer. So I think once when you get and there's Gigi who started off with our marketing OG marketing person and is now like really kind of serving um as an amazing kind of on the sales side and onboarding and all of that. So um I guess all this to say is like our team is so diverse in terms of our background. And that's what I think is just really important when you build a strong foundational team, right? Like everyone has a different perspective on solutioning because they have different experiences professionally as well as personally. And it was really beautiful. We had a lot of like New York just opened. There was like a lot of weird things that have been happening with, I'll call it the like identity politic bullying, and it's the world is crazy right now. So what has been really amazing is that when we have things come up in our community with our business, we're able to really come together and be respectful of each other's opinions and points of view and have really thorough discourse and come up with a plan together that everyone feels comfortable with. And I've never really had that ever in a company. So I think it's more like we don't have HR, so we're HRing ourselves in the most, mindful way. And when we got down to Mexico, it was also my birthday. So I was really honored that a lot of people flew out to celebrate. And I think that's part of it. It's like, sometimes forget that with all of this healing, joy and delight and celebration is also part of healing. It's always kind of very austere in a lot of ways. So I've never done a group journey and I've never done a Western led clinical style journey. So I flew down my therapist, who was amazing, and I flew down a chef. So, with all the things that I've been learning across the different facilitators and healing modalities and experiences, I was like, let me put together something that I'm curious about. And I'm like, guys, you guys are the guinea pig. We're going to do this. We're going to do feedback session. And it was very, very interesting. For me and most of my friends that came down, I would say we're probably very seasoned in terms of tripping. I mean, I started when I was 15. I was curious about psychedelics, and my uncle went and procured for me and sat with me. So I've just had a very different experience. And then, lived in the Bay Area for 10 years where continued that whole exploration of self using different types of modalities. So this was my first like Western led. Um, for me, it was not my cup of tea.
And
Um,
really quickly, when you say Western led, so instead of like a shaman or a elder in the tribe that has worked with the medicine, it's more like a clinician that has their structured framework for the psychedelic experience.
correct.
Okay.
And you know, my therapist also has done, you know, like I'm going to say they. So they've been around as, 20 years as a therapist. Amazing. I love my therapist. Um, has never done psychedelics recreationally. So I think there's also a difference between the mindset and expectation of someone who's done recreationally, and then going into a very clinical setting, and vice versa. So for me, the clinical part, like, I'm just going to throw this out there. I really don't think it's fair for a Western led group to use the term group journey or ceremony because there's none of that. Like Western clinical is, from what I experienced, is you take your medicine and then you're observed. So there really isn't ceremony around it. There really isn't, there was some prep, but when I hear group journey, I'm thinking that the facilitator, we're going to be doing certain exercises or things to vibrate or raise our frequency to be in a elevate everybody to a common frequency where we do something with that. So I think that is going to be more and I hate the term shaman, Seibo, like everyone's a fucking shaman these days. Um, a more, I'd say like traditional indigenous led world, I guess. So it was very interesting. And then the other thing I noticed was there was a lot of no's. So don't go in the pool, don't do this, don't do that. Because I think Western led, the undercurrent of it to me after this experience was very much there's fear and liability as the undercurrent of Western, which I think for some folks who have never done it before, like structure is important. Having the box to feel comfortable and safe is very important. But for those of us that have been doing it for a very long time, I think it was just too much structure because I was like, we all wanted to go in the pool, like I wanted to go look at the lizards. I wanted to have music. I wanted to move my body. And with Western, it was very much like, this is your setting. This is your eye mask. You stay here and you process. So, it was really eye opening for me. I can, being a user experience designer, I can really see what types of people need this type of modality. But for myself, and I'd say most of my personal friends, dance needs to be part of it. Music needs to be part of it. Being able to do things together needs to be part of it. And fear of liability in someone dying or drowning is not the vibe
Yeah, oh,
for me.
man. I
For me,
thank you for that answer, this is probably something that I wouldn't say was, like, bothering me, but something that just didn't seem aligned, and then you just kinda vocalized it, and it was that my opinion, I would say, is in line with yours, is that the Western style facilitating is more about, like, risk management than the actual, like, transmuting of the energy, and for a long time I believe that, like, this clinical setting was, like, the better setting, like, "Oh, wait, there's gonna be, like, a doctor here if anything happens," and like you, I've been tripping since, my teenage years, and I've never needed, like, a doctor, I mean, there were definitely some, like, slippery times when I was like, "I don't know what's going on," and needed someone to help ground me, but, this fear of, like, something like you
bad
said,
one.
like, a risk mitigation, versus, like, the true healing, and I myself, when I was talking to you about my ayahuasca journey, this was the first time I sat down with pages that flew up from Brazil and really experienced this group healing session with the music, with the dancing. And I loved what you said, like, psychedelics doesn't need to be all about healing, and, this trip, it was part healing, and then the other part was just to experience more joy too, and being around the indigenous elders, listening to the songs, even not understanding, like, what the songs meant, like, I could feel, like, the energy from them and kind of
Agree.
understand, like, "Oh, this is, like, a joyful song," or, "This is, like, a healing song that I may purge," so I really love that you brought that up, and I also even though I agree with you, I like that you said, "For me," because I do have some friends
Yeah.
that could, I think, only really let go if they were in this
Yeah,
clinical setting.
everybody's different. And, like one thing too that I did like was there was a lot of prepping, right? So there was intake, there was a lot of discussion, like what's happening on your life. There was a lot of integration afterwards. So like I appreciate the kind of bookends, but the journey part itself was not the vibe that again for me. And what I'm learning too in the past 5 years in this world, there is no rules. I don't think there's rules to any of it. I think there's certain guidelines of different healing modalities. But at the end of the day, I think the beautiful part of psychedelics, what it's really trying to do is increase your intuitive voice, like help you understand what's best for you. I'm a big believer that you are your best doctor, you're your best teacher. These are all tools. Like these are all tools that help you understand yourself to help you make decisions for yourself to create the life that you want.
Mm.
So so that's the part that I love. Now, with some of the shamanistic ones, the egos from some of these shamans are fucking crazy. You have to do this, you have to do that. I'm like, no, bro, like, you don't have to do anything. This is about the person and their experience, not about you and what you think you are. It's so on both ends, there's crap, and again, I will always tell people, you're your best teacher at the end of the day. What we've and I think we're very, very much born with all of these gifts. It's just somehow in the world that we are today, those gifts have never been trained. Those things have never been, or shadows, and we've never been taught how to deal with shadows. The gifts of intuition are slowly dulled as we get older. So psychedelics are a really great way to tap back into those things and open those things up again and release the things that no longer serve.
Mm.
So, I just think that like I always tell people it's kind of like you get to look at yourself from an objective point of view without all the baggage that you've either accumulated throughout your environment, learned within your family structure, or even were born with in your DNA and your bloodline. So it's done wonders for me. And I've seen so many folks just kind of try to be better formed humans or versions of themselves.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, we talked about healing. I'm just curious, do you have any healing modalities that have really stood out for you that have, really given you a lot of transformative change in your life?
I think life is a great one. Um, I think the shadow work stuff is really important. Again, none of us know, we weren't born with, especially I think in Chinese culture, a lot of like, if anything negative happens, we don't talk about it. I think also in, American culture, it's like if something bad happens, we just pretend that it didn't. Or we kind of everything is squashing down. So and then at a certain point, it just gets too much and weird things happen. We act out, we create situations that are repeating the same shit over and over again. So I think the shadow work is really important. I've been doing a lot with my therapist on the inner child, reparenting the inner child. That has been tremendous. Tremendous. Again, not really understanding some of those things and, I'm 49 this year. So I think instead of a midlife crisis, maybe we call it something different, like a mid growth evolution or something. Cause I feel like that's what it is, like having the time and the flexibility to be able to look at some of those things and create the next book. I call it the next book of life, right? So first 50 years is one book, next maybe 50 years, another book. Everyone says I'm going to live forever. My mom says, yes, that's because only the mean people live longer. so, um, so I think those two things. I'm a big fan of ketamine. Like again, like I grew up with it on the dance floor. So very different way. I think most of the stuff that I've done is more on the recreational side. Um, I'm a huge fan of LSD right now. I think it's much more powerful than MDMA, honestly. Um, so yeah, LSD, inner child work, shadow work, um, and therapy. I have an amazing therapist who is not the normal therapist. They also share their experience with things, so we definitely have more of a human conversation than just a patient doctor. And I think it's because they use psychedelics, so it's influenced the way that they communicate and run sessions.
Yeah, wow. Another thing that stood out as you were speaking was how psychedelics can get you more back in touch with your intuition. And I would say maybe the biggest change for me has been this shift of trusting my own intuition or my own inner voice. And, I used to watch my wife make intuitive decisions, and I would just be weighing out the pros and cons and looking at the data and just getting into analysis paralysis. And I believe that, you know, I don't know if you know, but over the last 3 years, I worked as an executive coach, and I would probably say the number one thing that has come up without it being explicitly brought up was lack of trust of self. And I
Okay.
kinda connect that to lack of trust of your intuition. And so I wanted to ask you, like, do you have like, for someone listening, like, "Hey, I want to be able to trust that little voice in my head more." What would you tell them?
Do it. It things and you've looked at it. I mean, if you looked at the situations in your life where you didn't trust that voice, you know the outcome. Every outcome is turned to shit. It's I would say like it's this analogy really resonated with me, which is like all of your parts of you are in a car and your intuitive voice has not been able to drive the car because fear has driven the car or insecurity has driven the car or conditioning has driven the car. And what we're really trying to do is like give your intuitive voice the car for longer moments and everybody else can sit in the back seat or maybe in the passenger seat and eventually like maybe they can exit. But like I also want to just reemphasize that the shadow parts of you, they don't go away, right? Like they're still there. And one of my healers in Mexico, we were talking about, when people have a bad trip and he said something that was like made total sense. It's like, hey, like all of these shadows are like little kids. If you ignore little kids, what do they do when they have access to you? They're screaming. They're like, hey, they're causing havoc because they've never gotten attention from you. And all they want is to have some attention. So he was talking about like whenever you're encountering the shadows, it's cool. Give them the attention, acknowledge them. And then at some point, give yourself a time limit. And at some point, you're like, hey, I see you. You're part of me. I love you, but you're not all of me. And once they have that recognition and that time from you, they step aside. And the other parts of you, the delight, the joy, the happiness, these come into play also. So it's about like, there's nothing negative about you. We've got to stop thinking that if something is bad or something is good. These are all pieces of us that we've collected along the way that need to be acknowledged and celebrated. The good, quote unquote, and the bad, quote unquote. Like those are just pieces of us. So I don't know if that's just how I kind of look at things. And, like it's working for me at least, like having some different perspectives and just reframing things a lot, especially, I was in the Bay Area for 10 years. I get that whole stress of, no failure, must raise money, like here's all the data. And at the end of the day, like I worked with all the data companies, Seibo. No one's using that data for anything. Honestly, it's like we're collecting these piles of data and then you have to have like the you know, super smart person come in and analyze the data, but we're focusing on so much data that's not usable. So like, what the fuck?
I love it. There are so many things that you said that really resonated with me. Number one was, well, when you get some intuition, take action or follow it, I think is what you said. And,
Yeah,
I really love that because I've looked at intuition as like building a relationship. And if you like have a friend that's telling you, like, hey, why don't you come over for dinner after work on Friday? And you never come over. Maybe they stop inviting you like weekly and it goes to monthly. And if you still don't come, then it's like yearly. And
that's a West Coast thing. That is such a West Coast cultural habit, I gotta say.
is it? Well,
It is a Coast cultural habit.
like, the reason I brought that up is like, well, hey, if your intuition is guiding you and you're never listening to it, then, it's like any relationship. It's gonna be like, well, hey, Sabo's not listening to the intuition. Why should we keep telling him to go left when he always goes right? So I totally resonate with you just saying, yeah, just follow your intuition. And I found that when I follow my intuition, then it's gonna drop the next few little breadcrumbs for me to follow after that, and it'll just keep showing me the breadcrumbs, and I don't need to know, like, the entire GPS map to where I'm going. I just need to kinda see, like, the next 3 or 4 steps in front of me and trust that as long as I'm aware of that, the next 3 or 4 steps will be okay. And the other thing that really resonated with me was when you're talking about doing shadow work and not necessarily like killing the shadow, but accepting and integrating it. I think that is maybe one of the most powerful switches in in my conceptualization of healing that I made, which was not trying to kill the ego or get rid of the shadow, but really just fully accept it and love it to understand, like, hey, you are who you are today because of all these things. And
Yes.
it's not about rejecting this part of you, but actually recognizing it, accepting it, and then integrating it within you.
Yeah, I mean, it's been like I feel like I'm at this point where I've been really really stringent on trying to practice new things. Because I'm like, okay, well, the first like 47 years of my life, I've been trying to follow the script that I was given, and it's never worked. So, like, at what point do I stop banging my head against the wall and decide to like, oh, this boulder, why am I pushing it up the hill? Like, what the fuck? Like, who told me to push this boulder? Why don't I put the boulder down, walk around it, and see what's up at the top of the hill? So it's been pretty cool. And then like there was a mentor that I had when I was my 30s, and his name was Antonio. I met him in Barcelona, and he was like had this energy that was just like you just wanted to be next to him, like, and you were just like, tell me more. And I was like, Antonio, what's your secret? And he's like, baby girl, one day you're gonna realize that all the magic happens when you have peace, and at some point you're gonna have so much magic that you're gonna do whatever you can to protect that peace. And I'm like, I think finally at 49, I've had come to this realize because the things that are happening, like I'm still busting my ass. Like I'm doing 16-hour days right now across 3 companies. And but I love everything. And the things that need to happen are just appearing in such organic, magical ways that I see those signs. So I'm like, this is fucking amazing. And the way that I feel physically around the people, the situations, like everybody is like fucking chill. And I've never experienced this before. So like it's like, how do I describe it? It's like almost a timeline where it's like the shadow stuff used to be longer and these moments of joy and burst were short. I'd have them, so I get a taste of them. And now it's kind of what the script is flipped. Like these moments of like being chill and also redefining peace as not being boredom. Like, I think that's one big thing. It was a big transition. Like, why do I want to do this? I'm bored. But no, it's actually giving me peace. So now these stretches of like, oh, cool, everything's chill as fuck. And then having smaller moments of like, what the fuck is going on? Like, that's been just a really beautiful like experience. And that's just giving me more confidence into leaning into this world of like surrendering, still busting your ass, but not trying to force anything. And I'm like, and now I think I've gone a little bit too hard in the opposite way because I'm Chinese, recovering Chinese people pleaser. So now I'm, yeah, fuck no, absolutely not. They're like, well, no, absolutely. I'm just being very regimented just to see what happens. Cause everyone in my family is an engineer. So I'm very good with structure. But we're going to flip the script and see how it is without all the structure. And at some point I'll probably come back in the middle, but, um, but everything is working out really nicely. I feel like, did I just discover the secret to the universe? Like all we have to do is just be at peace with things and, understand like, what type of things do you want in your life? Who do you want in your life? Like, how do they make you feel? Intuition. How do they make you feel? The situation, the person, when you're with them and when you're done with them. Um, Not done with them, but when your interaction is over, like, how do you feel?
Yeah. Wow. I'm 1 year behind you. I'm turning 48 next month. And it's interesting, man, everything that you described, I would just be whenever needed to get done. And most of the time, that's all that was needed. And then more recently, like late last year, I started getting this intuitive hit that it was time to um, get like I moved to this really secluded rural area. And I had been working as an executive coach for the last 3 years, and it was like, hey, it's time to just kind of reintroduce yourself to society. And when I say reintroduce myself to society, I would probably see in 1 week, outside of dropping my kids off for school, like maybe 2 or 3 people. That's all I would see that week. And so when I got this intuition to go to MJ BizCon last year, I just went. I got hired on the spot by some company that wanted me to design vape. And it was really this kind of like the way that you described it was perfect. My life was like a bunch of suffering with like a few peaks every now and then. And those peaks would be like, oh, yeah, this is why I'm suffering to get to another one of these peaks. And over the last 3 years, I wouldn't say it's completely flipped, but it's been more of
Or
like,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah, it's been more of like, oh, I feel kind of, I like to use the word equanimous, like I just feel this like feeling of like calmness, peace, but not being bored. And then with a few moments of like being bored, super stressed out. Oh yeah, I am a human with like tons of emotion. Oh man, I'm trying to go through some shit. But I would say maybe you're suffering. And
Yes.
I had always lived in the framework, oh, the more you're suffering for, the more like purpose you're gonna feel.
Yeah.
And it would suffer if you want, but you could absolutely grow and expand without the
Yeah.
suffering.
I saw this quote says suffering is not an achievement. Can we, can we like put that aside for a moment? And, I think that's totally true. And like, I also have a couple other things that I've implemented, which is like anybody that I spend any of my time with that is not related, or even I'd say work. I have to be able to put you down as an emergency contact. If if I can't do that, then not right now. Like I just need really solid people who have my back. And that's the only free time I have is going to be around those types of people.
Mm.
And things have changed so much. No more dramas that you have to feel like you have to fix. All the fucking bullshit. Like I have a very peaceful life. It's been pretty freaking cool, I gotta say.
Yeah. I love that you could say that, also work 16 hours a week at the same time. It's like, hey, I have a peaceful life while working 16 hours a day. And to me, that is one of the, in my opinion, one of the other beautiful lessons I learned on my spiritual journey was the ability to hold paradoxes in my mind more easily.
Yes.
And I found that, like, before I thought, "Oh, well, if it's a paradox, it's showing that, like, it should be one or the other." And now it's more, no, it's actually both at the same time. You get to choose which side you wanna be on. And so I love that of, like, I living a peaceful life, yet I'm working 16 hours a day. I think most people would think, how could you have a peaceful life if you're just grinding 16 hours a day? And it's like, well, yeah, if you think of it as a grind, then you will experience it as a grind. But if you see that as, wow, I'm so grateful, I'm so lucky to have 16 hours of passion projects to work on every day, you'll experience it a completely different way.
Exactly. I mean, I love my team. Like, we're more family than anything else. So, like, being able to work with people that you respect and you enjoy. I have clients who are all trying to, like I said, become more fully formed humans. Like, it's nice. So, like, I'm hustling and I'm grinding, but it's with people that I enjoy and projects that I enjoy. And then my body is not enjoying it, for sure. But then my reward to myself is I'm gonna go and leave for 3 weeks to go rest and recover. And, so to your point, like, you can be whatever you want. You don't have to be one note. And that's one of the things I love about New York is people are very multidimensional. Like, I lived on both coasts, and that's what I do enjoy is, like, you could be a mess one day and you could be like the most brilliant mind creating things the next day, like, so it's just, I gotta just see for people for who they are and be cool with who they are, you know? Um, yeah, I'm learning a lot right now about myself and kind of the things that I enjoy and the things that I want to do. And really, the psychedelics are helpful. They really kind of help you sharpen the lens and understand yourself better in a way that you can make better choices to make the shit happen.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, this hour like really just flew by. I feel like we're just getting started, but in the interest of keeping the format of the podcast, even though I could do whatever I want. The one question I love to leave people off with is, I did a whole bunch of question asking and you did a wonderful job answering them, but what's most important for Lulu to get off of her chest right now? What do you want to communicate to the world?
Oh, I just think that it's so crazy out there right now in the world. um, the political climate, social climates. We're at the crux of, I think, a transition. I mean, they always say you only have to look backwards to look forwards. I think there's lots of energetic things happening, and um, but it's going to be okay. It's a cycle. So I would say protect your peace, be around people and situations that can keep your energy and the way your outlook in a forward direction. I'm not going to say positive because shit happens all the time. And just understand that it's a cycle. Everything is a cycle. We're probably coming towards the low of a cycle. So be prepared for it and make sure that, again, try to keep your peace as much as possible.
I love that. That there's, I coached 288 people in the last 3 years, and no one has come to me because everything was great in their life. They all came to me because shit hit the fan and they needed to do something about it. And when I think about society on a macro level, I think about it the same way as, like, we make the biggest societal change when, as a collective, we decide we don't want this anymore. And as much as I would love for smooth transitions, my experience has shown me like something needs to happen that we all rally behind And I believe the same thing as you is like, hey, we're given an opportunity now to choose what values are important to us. And those that choose differently, we will know who they are. And this is an opportunity, I believe, for all of us to make the choices that are in alignment with our spirit and create the world that we want. And that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, other than the fact that Michelle Yeoh was so awesome in it, like just the title of that movie, like really intrigued me. And so I started researching it. And I don't know if you know, but it's one of the latest theories in quantum physics that the past and the future are all illusions. Everything that has ever happened, everything that will ever happen is all happening simultaneously in the
In
present
all the
moment.
dimensions.
Yep.
Yeah, and
So
all the dimensions as well. Yep.
Yep, so if you're looking backwards and, like, trying to maintain a certain thing, well, you're gonna have a certain experience, but if you're looking forward into the world that you wanna create, I absolutely believe that you have access to those future potentialities much more greater than if you're focused on looking in the rear and trying to keep things, like, a certain way and trying to control something that always just wants to expand. So I really love that last thing that you, said. And for those that are listening that want to learn more about you or learn more about On the Revel, where do we send them to?
So our Instagram is at On the Revel, Revel. And you can email me, just Lulu at On the Revel. And we'll be launching our wave, we're calling our new psychedelic conference Waves. So we'll probably launch it in Q1 of 2025 in New York City.
Oh, I love it. Waves. I could bring that back to vibrations and frequencies. Again, my two favorite words that my wife's like, people are gonna think you're some Santa Cruz hippie if you keep on using these words. I'm like, yeah, but they use the right words. It's frequencies
Yeah,
and waves. Um,
yeah.
well, Lulu, this was so awesome to have you on the show. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm so happy that we could reconnect. I get to sit on the other side, learn more about you and your story. And what I want you to know is that there's any help that you need, please don't hesitate to shine the vape signal, the mushroom signal, the DMT signal. I will answer in a jiffy. And I just really appreciate being able to spend an hour with you uninterrupted and really getting to hear and transmit your story to my listeners.
Oh, thanks, Seibo. It's been really cool. Like I think we spoke last time maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and just to kind of see the evolution and life path is really beautiful. So thank you for having me. It's been so great to chop it up with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me